Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Above the Noise. What a time to be back. So much has been happening around the world, and we'll get right to it. All right, where to start? So, over the past couple weeks, there have been a lot of developments, in specifically in the Middle East, and what's going on in the war between Israel and Iran that has started, and now it seems to be there's a ceasefire, and we'll talk all about what happened and what will be the outcome and the consequences. But before I even get to that point, I actually wanted to talk about a little bit how did we even get to this point? Because over the last couple of weeks, I'm seeing a lot of people say things like this came out of the blue, this came out of nowhere. We were really not expecting to hear about Iran being involved in any of this. And the reality is that's actually not true at all. Iran has always been a part of this conflict in some way, shape, or form. And even if it were not for October 7th and what happened in Israel on that day, I think those two countries would still be in confrontation eventually, just because they are so politically opposed to each other, ideologically, actually, not even politically, ideologically opposed to each other. But I would say that the events of October 7th definitely accelerated that clash. And what seems to be happening actually is if we're looking at this from the Israeli perspective, I think the way they're treating this, everything that has transpired since October 7th, they're treating this almost like the war to end all wars. And what do I mean by that? There seems to be like a little bit of a domino effect going on at the moment with all of the different wars in the region and regional conflicts. So if you look at the events that started everything, the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, of course, there's that war that Israel is still waging in Gaza with the stated objective of completely destroying Hamas and its military capabilities and taking their hostages out. While that was going on, last year we saw another war that happened in Lebanon, in which Israel was um, tried and actually was successful in taking out Hezbollah, their senior leadership, and also a lot of their military capabilities. They're also another proxy of Iran. So there's a lot of proxies of Iran in the region, and it does seem to me that there's really has been this domino effect in which they're all sort of falling one after the other. Of course, in the immediate aftermath of the war with Hezbollah, and specifically all of these pager attacks and all of their senior leadership being assassinated, just a few months after, we saw something that none of us again were expecting to see, at least now, which was the end of the civil war in Syria. Well, whether that's a real end of the civil war, I don't know, but certainly the regime of Assad falling and him fleeing to Russia. And that also came as a result, directly, I would say, as a result of the attack on Hezbollah, because at the end of the day, they were also supplying a lot of military personnel, a lot of soldiers, and a lot of weapons to Assad's regime in Syria. And when that was gone, there was really nothing to uphold that regime anymore. And that fell in December of last year. Um, Most recently now in April, the Houthis in Yemen, which are another proxy group of Iran in the region, were badly hit also by the United States. And it does seem to be that one after another, one step after another, this conflict has been going towards a direct clash between Israel and Iran. And that has happened. That's been going on for the past 2 weeks. Now, what would be their stated aim and goal? Well, Israel has said that they want to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities, and that's the biggest threat to them. With that being said, I personally think they wouldn't mind if there is a regime change. They definitely are not interested in the Ayatollah regime continuing to be there in Iran. But at the moment, as a first step, let's say, they're they're really not looking into that. So their entire objective was to go and strike nuclear sites, uranium enrichment sites, military targets, and take out senior military leadership as well as nuclear scientists, which is what they've done since June 12th, since they started this campaign. Now, there were a lot of questions before the United States involvement, whether the US will get involved or will not get involved, and how is that going to shape up the conflict. And ultimately, in the last 2, 3 days ago, the US did get involved. And the reason why they did is actually very simple, simply because the biggest nuclear sites are inside mountains, and Israel as a country doesn't have the military capabilities to send bombs that are strong enough to be able to destroy that. So they always, when they started this campaign, they knew that they would need the assistance of the United States in one way or another, and which is what they got. So at the moment, it's confirmed, it's final that the strike has happened. The reports are a little bit wishy-washy. It's not sure whether they actually did a lot of damage to the nuclear sites of Iran. Again, that's the news coming from the U.S. sources says that all 3 nuclear sites have been completely destroyed and they're not operational, and it will take Iranians a long time to rebuild them, considering also the fact that they don't have any or many credible nuclear scientists anymore. That would even be harder to do. Iranians themselves have said that the damage is actually not that substantial, and they were able to evacuate a lot of those facilities prior to the bombings. Now, I actually don't know whether that's true because obviously, even if the damage was substantial, they're not going to go around and say like, "Oh, yep, the U.S. they destroyed everything here." Of course not. But anyways, the strike has been done, and it was in and out. Definitely, there hasn't been any other direct involvement in any other military or other sites whatsoever. It was just really those 3 strikes on nuclear facilities. And the last couple of days, the world has sort of been like on edge. What's going to happen next? And I have to say, I was very entertained by the World War III memes, but obviously, this is not happening, and I actually don't think this is going to happen for one simple reason, which is that there's not really a world to come to the defense of Iran. So, if you think about their closest allies being the biggest ones being Russia and China, neither is particularly interested in going for a direct confrontation that might involve the United States. So, Russia obviously has its hands full in Ukraine, a war they're still fighting, and they don't really seem very interested in getting directly involved. I mean, they didn't really help Assad's regime in Syria either. All they did was give him asylum, and I don't think they're gonna do much for Iran as well. Would the if the regime of the Ayatollah falls. China as well, it's not very interested in getting militarily involved. It's not its style anyways that much. And it does seem like there's no really world that will come to the to help the Iranian regime. Of course, I think in this kind of scenario, you need strong alliances, and the alliance that is Iran, Russia, and China at the moment is not strong enough for them to consider helping each other militarily, which is obviously good for us. So there's not, as entertained as I have been by the memes, there's not going to be a world war. But that still doesn't mean that there's not going to be a regional war. So when it comes to the how things are shaped in the region, actually what happened is in the aftermath of the US strikes, Iran did respond because they felt like they had to respond. I think it would have been kind of they would lose face if they didn't do anything. But what they actually even did was very weak and I have to say very inconsequential. So they struck some US military bases in Qatar and Bahrain. They apparently gave prior warning to the Americans. Nobody was hurt, thank God. Nobody was harmed. There wasn't really a lot of damage that was inflicted on the military facilities themselves. So there hasn't really been that much going on. They did respond. It almost felt like a check the box exercise. So yes, they checked the box. They did respond. But to be honest, at this point, they don't really have the capacity to wage a very strong attack. I think their offensive has been more focused on Israel and in sending out missiles in their direction in the days following the American strikes. And that has been obviously the place that has been hit the hardest. But as far as a strong response to the United States, there hasn't really been anything, and I don't really think there will be something simply because they don't have the military capacity at the moment. They're so weakened to be able to go out and do that. So what has happened instead is that there seems to be now, over the past couple hours actually, a ceasefire agreement that was reached. That came very fast and out of the blue. I mean, it was already breached a couple times, but so far it seems to be holding since the past couple hours. And to be at this point, because it seems like Iran was so willing to sign this ceasefire agreement, I think they really just wanted to get this over with. They were not interested in a strong military show off. They were not interested in showing the world that they can take on these armies. They just wanted for everything to finish and just be done with it at this point, I feel like. And from if you look at this from the perspective of the United States and specifically Donald Trump, I think his message has always been very consistent. And I know there's a lot of people that don't like anything he does just because it's him and he's a very polarizing figure. But if you try to look at it objectively, I think he's always been very clear on one point, which is that he doesn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. And he's repeated this many, many times. So in this scenario, he followed through on what he's been saying. So Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. And the reason for his involvement has been to only and just only destroy the nuclear sites of Iran and nothing else. He's come out many times saying he's not in favor of a regime change. Of course, I think from his perspective, he also wanted to have a quick foreign policy win, just because when he came into office, he was boasting about ending the war in Ukraine, ending the war in Gaza, that he was going to be the peacemaker. He wants to make peace all around the world, and that has certainly not happened. I mean, it's been 5 months, so I do assume it takes a lot of time, but um, it was really hard for him to score any points with his base if he gets himself involved in another war. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I think from his perspective, he just wanted to have a very quick foreign policy win, which is what he was going after. And he announced the ceasefire deal on his social media, which I have to say, it's very millennial or Gen Z of him, but things change so fast. Every couple hours, there's something new happening. So yeah, he's been updating us about what's going on Twitter. And yeah, I don't know if that's a good strategy or not, but that's the way he communicates. And maybe he did score a quick win for himself. I think that's going to depend on whether the ceasefire actually does hold or not. But there's, from his perspective, I think two very important things are here to consider, or again, from an American perspective. The first one is obviously, are they actually willing to get involved in a regime change war? And at this point, I feel like they're not, there's no appetite on behalf of anybody, whether that's Republican or Democrat, right wing or left wing, to get the United States involved in a full on regime change, boots on the ground war in Iran. Um, there's actually a lot of infighting between Donald Trump's own base, and a huge part of them are actually isolationists. And I want to talk a bit about that as well later, because a lot of them were never interested in the first place to get involved, even with this one step, even in the step of going and bombing Iran's nuclear sites. So there's a lot of dissent when it comes to this foreign policy decision among his own supporters. And I think he just wanted to have a very quick foreign policy win for himself. And he has so far seems to be managed to have done that again if the ceasefire holds. From the perspective of Israel, I think they are also got a win, but not such a strong one. So of course for them as well, they did want to have the nuclear program destroyed. They wanted to weaken Iran militarily. They managed to tick all the boxes there as well. So they did achieve their objectives. I think from their perspective, there's a much, much stronger appetite for regime change, obviously, because they know that the regime in Iran is very anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and so in this case, they would have liked for Trump to quote unquote finish the job, but that doesn't seem to be likely there because that's not something that the U.S. president wants to do. And again, weirdly enough, I do think that this is also a win for the Iranian regime itself as well, because they're in power, clearly. They managed to hold on to power. Yes, they may have a lot of losses. They probably had a lot of military loss, economic, weapons, and clearly their nuclear program is gone if the reports coming out of the US are true. But they're still in power and they're still there and they're the ones still in charge. So if you look at all this situation and if nothing changes for the ceasefire holds, I have to say that this seems to be a win for Trump and for his administration because they achieved their objectives while not getting the military involved actively in any serious capacity. They don't have boots on the ground. I mean, they have their military bases, but they don't have boots on the ground in Iran. And that's a win for him. And Trump gets to keep his base happy as much as possible. It's a win for Israel because they also destroyed the nuclear capability while the US came in and destroyed completely the nuclear capability of Iran. So they are happy. They're somewhat happy, less so than the Americans, but certainly still happy about what's going on. And the Iranian regime itself as well. It's there and it's survived and it's standing. And that's only a cause of happiness for them. And I think the only real losers here, unfortunately, as it happens with every single war, is the local people, the local population, the Iranians specifically themselves, because I think for them, they were really, really hoping that this would be the end of the oppressive regime that has been torturing them for almost 50 years now. There have been reports that many of them were collaborating with the Israelis, and that's going to really be hard for them to deal with after the war is over, because the regime in Iran is not going to now concentrate outwards. They know that at the moment they don't have the capability to do that, but they're very much going to crack down inward and they're going to go after dissidents and they're going to go after people that have opposed them or in some way, shape, or form supported the Israeli efforts, the Israeli military efforts and intelligence personnel. So I think the real losers are going to be the people of Iran, and that's very sad because they have truly been living under this oppressive government for 40, 50 years now, and the end for them was so near, and now it seems to be that nothing is going to happen. They will have to bear the wrath of this regime on their back all along. This is a situation that's constantly developing. So I'm sure there's going to be more updates coming soon. But apart from what's going on in the world in general and all the updates of the day-to-day updates that are going on, I actually want to focus on two phenomenon that I've seen or two sort of trains of thought that are going on simultaneously, and they're both very disturbing. One more so than the other because one I understand, but the other one I really don't understand. So the first one is actually more on the response of so-called liberals or what liberalism has sort of turned into. I think I'm going to make a separate episode about this because it's a very interesting topic. But I have seen so many people that on paper are the most liberal, progressive, modern, forward-looking people that just because Iran has been in a direct conflict with an entity or a government they really, really don't like, whether that's the US government or the Israeli government, they have now turned into full-fledged supporters of the Iranian regime and the Iranian government. I don't know about you, but if you are in favor of a government that oppresses its own people, that literally butchers its own people, that kills its own women for daring to show their hair in public, you don't strike me as particularly liberal. I don't think you get to call yourself a liberal anymore. I don't think you get to call yourself a progressive anymore. I really don't think that you're any of those things because you're deliberately and knowingly, you know what this regime is capable of. You know how much they've made their own people suffer. and you're knowingly on their side in this conflict morally because they're against a country that you really don't like. I wonder how far this anti-Western, anti-American narrative is going to take progressives, because at the moment, as things stand, they are aligning themselves with an authoritarian, theocratic regime that does not respect human rights. So I don't know if you're on the side of the people that are pro-Iran just because you're anti-America. I think you need to really evaluate your values and try to make sense of where you stand on issues politically and I would say also morally, because that's just not a logical stance to take. If you have any in if you have any sort of liberal values in yourself, I don't think that you would be happy that this regime is there. And again, I'm not saying that, oh, we should go and topple every government that doesn't respect human rights. That's obviously not feasible, plausible, practical. And I don't think it's gonna end up with good things happening for people in general, but that's just something that I've observed that's very, very disturbing. And another, on the flip side of that, I've also been looking at how the reaction has been on the side of the people that are more conservative, and again, specifically the people that have elected Donald Trump and his coalition that are very much America first, right? That's his message. He's America first. He doesn't want to get the US involved in any foreign wars. He wants to focus on the problems that people have at home. And that's, I understand a bit better that kind of thinking of, oh, we should focus on our own problems. We have problems at home. We shouldn't be going around the world toppling governments that we don't like just because, or they don't like us just because. That I kind of understand more. But I don't really get the isolationist position in the sense that you cannot just take your hands off from everything that's going on around the world and say like, okay, that's not my problem, just you do you figure it out, simply because it's a little disingenuous. The United States has hundreds of military bases all around the world. It is the country that has the highest number of military bases in the world, bar none. 90% of foreign military bases in all of the entirety of the planet Earth are owned by the United States government. And so to have this kind of position while your military is literally everywhere, every strategic location, everywhere around the world, and to say, you know what, oopsie, like, sorry, but we really don't want to get involved right now because that's your problem. You do you figure it out, while simultaneously having everything, having military presence everywhere is just a little disingenuous. And I feel like it's a bit of a shallow position to take. Like, I completely understand you just want to focus on your own problems, like, handle what's going on at home. I get that. But at the same time, you cannot say, like, I'm an isolationist and then have then hundreds of military bases, not just in the Middle East, but everywhere, like from Asia to South America to Europe, everywhere around the world. So you're either going to have to choose or take up the role that you've chosen for yourself after since World War II, which is the police of the world, because that has essentially was the United States has turned into since World War II. Take up that role and fulfill it properly, or and by fulfill it properly, again, I don't mean topple every regime, go do regime change here and there, but obviously you have to be somehow involved in the world affairs because you are. Or if you're a true isolationist, just say, okay, we will dismantle all of the military bases everywhere. We'll take all of our soldiers back home. We don't want to have any other foreign involvement in any other government. We take everybody back home and we'll see what happens. I don't like this in between. Like, we're all in, we're also in, we have the military bases, but we're also out because we don't want to intervene. That doesn't make sense. That's a very wishy-washy position. So you're only there if it's relevant for you, if it's useful for you, if it helps you, but you're not there, but you're also kind of there if it doesn't. So I think the isolationists are definitely getting a lot of traction, are gaining a lot of power in the US government, but they need to be more strategically positioning themselves and making bolder moves instead of just saying, let's stay out of wars. Because literally, then what are your military bases doing in the Middle East if you want to stay out of wars? Then take them out. That's it. Okay, that's it for today. And let me know what your thoughts are. I'm very curious to hear different perspectives. And obviously, as always, like and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.